Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Theory Podcast. Today, we'll be discussing social learning theory. In this episode, we will discuss how social learning theory explains people's problems, what the theory says is necessary in order for new helpful learning to occur, the key components of the theory, what research says about the theory, and how this theory can be used in the field of social work. So, let's jump right into it. Social learning theory focuses on aspects of how people learn different behaviors. Social learning theory falls under the behaviorist perspective, which suggests that human behavior is learned when individuals interact with their environment. There is no denying that one's environment plays a crucial role in developing behavior. These behaviors can be learned through the observation of others. I'm sure all of you listeners can think of one thing you've learned simply by purposefully observing another person. I think back to when I was first learning how to ride a bike without training wheels. It was modeled to me how to balance and pedal at the same time, and after a few tries, I was able to do so. I challenge you to think of a behavior or task you've learned through observing another person. Now let's hop into where social learning theory comes from. Social learning theory was influenced by the work of many psychologists. It relies on the principles of conditioning, which assert that behavior is shaped by its reinforcing or punishing consequences. Perhaps the most well-known contributor is Albert Bandura. In the 1960s, he became known for social learning theory, and in 1986, it developed further into the social cognitive theory. Bandura suggests that behavior is learned by imitation, observation, beliefs, and expectations. In this view, the learner is not passively manipulated by elements of the environment, but can use cognitive processes to learn behaviors. Social learning theory does not pinpoint one specific reason for people's problems, but rather focuses on how they learn behaviors. Problem behaviors are maintained by either positive or negative reinforcement. These maladaptive behaviors can be modeled, for example, parents' drinking behaviors or domestic violence, both of which could increase the likelihood of a child participating in said behaviors. According to social learning theory, we're motivated by nature to experience pleasure and avoid pain. Whether those behaviors are maladaptive or productive depends on the person and the environment that they're in. So now that we know a little bit more about how social learning theory explains problematic behaviors, now we will get into some of the key components. Bandura identifies three basic models of observational learning. A live model, which involves an actual individual demonstrating or acting out a behavior. A symbolic model, which involves real or fictional characters displaying behaviors in books, films, television programs, or online media. And the verbal instructional model, which involves descriptions and explanations of a behavior. So in order for this learning to occur, a person must follow specific steps for observational learning. These steps include attention. You must be focused on the person, task, etc. in order to learn from it. Retention, which is the ability to store the information. Reproduction, which is the ability to perform the behavior you have observed. And lastly, motivation. In order for observational learning to work, you have to be motivated to perform the behavior that was imitated for you. Bandura's well-known Bobo doll experiment in 1961 focused on the role of observational learning and modeling. Children who observed adults hitting a Bobo doll were more likely to reproduce the same aggressive behavior when later playing with the doll. This research showed that a behavior, such as aggression, to be the product of a more complex observational process, through which children can learn new patterns of behavior vicariously. 2 decades later, in 1986, Bandura added the social cognitive theory. This theory proposes that human behavior is driven by beliefs and expectations. And Bandura suggests that self-efficacy, or a sense of personal competence, and efficacy expectation, the expectation that one can personally accomplish a goal, play an important role in motivation and human behavior. So in order to take these social learning theory concepts and put it into practice, it's important to analyze the therapeutic relationship. Social learning theory emphasizes the importance of observational learning and one's environment. The therapist has now become part of the client's environment. Therapist, social worker, anyone who is trying to help the client. It's vital for this therapist or social worker to be a model and provide a supportive environment for the client to learn, observe, and practice more beneficial behaviors. In order for this to occur, building a positive rapport with the client is vital in their development of these new skills. So let's take a look at how social learning theory can be applied to a variety of behaviors we see in today's society. Some of the situations we will look at include technology use, drug use, and parent-child relationships, as well as aggression. So technology is something we're all familiar with. So first, let's take a look at technology. So technology use is a prevalent issue for children and adults today. Children can learn about responsible technology usage, and this is a necessary skill because technology has become such an integral part of everything that we do. Social learning theory can be applied to help explain how children are learning to use technology. In social learning theory, children learn behaviors by observing adults and seeing the consequences of their behaviors. These children then replicate the behaviors that are reinforced. As such, the social learning theory may explain how children's technology use develops. Previous research has demonstrated direct associations between parent media use and child media use. Studies have found that adults' technology use in the families sometimes came from observations of their own parents' behaviors, suggesting that social learning related to technology use can span across generations. Based on this research, it is important for adults to be aware of their technology use around children and the examples they are setting for their children's own technology use. In my experience, this has become a huge topic of conversation in the school system. As teachers, we are asked to model responsible tech usage and keep our phones away during instructional time, just as we ask the students to do. Hence, it's hard for us to enforce a policy if we're not following that policy ourselves. So modeling good cell phone use etiquette is important for the overall culture of the classroom and the school. The concepts of social learning theory can also be applied to addictive behaviors. Specifically, the reciprocal determinism model, or the interaction between behavioral factors, personal factors, and environmental factors, can in part help to explain some addiction behaviors. Behavior is largely, but not exclusively, associated with our ability to manipulate cognitively and store symbolic representations of our environment, which is a fancier way of saying that what and how we think affects the way we behave, but how we behave also affects how we think, and so on, which is referred to the concept reciprocal determinism. For example, an individual could learn to use drugs and stop using drugs by observing others using and not using drugs. We think about the concepts that we're all taught about peer pressure and surrounding yourself with the right people in this situation. So, for someone who is an addict, watching someone use drugs can influence outcome expectations. So, either the drug use will lead to a pleasurable experience, and efficacy expectations, I will not be able to refuse the offer of drugs, which then increases the probability that drug use can occur. It's also important to note that the cognitive social learning theory recognizes the importance of associative and other learning processes as determinants of behavior. So, something we can take away from this knowledge is that one's environment has the potential to encourage great decisions, but also poor ones. As an educator, I have seen students fall into poor behaviors because of the people they hang around with and observe regularly. As we have been discussing so far today, the environment plays a large role in how people learn beginning at a very young age. The parent child relationship is one way in which children learn how to interact with the world around them. Research has shown that their children's strategies for managing emotions, resolving disputes, and engaging with other people are learned from experience and carried forward across settings and time. For younger children, the primary source of these experiences is the parent child and family relationship environment. Accordingly, interventions to improve child behavior have focused on altering the quality of parenting. Specific parenting behaviors targeted for assessment and treatment are positive attention and praise for the child's desirable behavior, contingency of parental response, directions and instructions that are clear, and set limits on undesirable behavior and criticism. Numerous randomized clinical trials show that parenting interventions that improve these parenting dimensions can reduce child negative behavior. So, if we think about the way that we learn things between reinforcement and punishment, adjusting how the parents react to certain situations can either encourage or inhibit children's negative behaviors. So, reinforcing them both positively and negatively is a key learning tool. Educating parents on how to deal with these challenging behaviors help give them the skills to help children develop more functional and beneficial behaviors. So we're going to take a look at another well-researched area related to social learning theory. This area is aggression. So as we previously discussed with Bandura's Bobo doll experiment, further research on the learning of aggression behaviors has been conducted. Aggression is generally defined as a behavior that results in personal injury and physical destruction. The way in which people learn these aggressive behaviors comes from a variety of sources. For example, studies of familiar determinants of aggression show that parents who favor aggressive solutions to problems have children who tend to use these aggressive tactics in dealing with others. In addition to familial influences, the subculture also influences aggressive behavior. The highest occurrence of aggression is found in communities in which aggressive models around fighting is regarded as a valued attribute. An additional source of aggressive conduct is symbolic modeling provided by mass media. If you think about the access to technology, media, social media, and TV that we have today, this is important to know. Research dis- discussed the effects of televised influences on social behavior. These include it teaches aggressive style of conduct, it alters restraint over aggressive behaviors, it desensitizes and habituates people to violence, and it shapes people's images of reality upon which they base many of their actions. It is important to note that television and mass media can foster humanitarian qualities as well as injurious conduct. So that's something we can take away from this. It's important to note that while these TV shows and apps and things have the ability to model like negative behaviors and reinforce negative behaviors, they also have the ability to teach positive social skills. So it's important to note and pay attention to specifically what people are watching on these devices. While Bandura was discussing the impact of television, we can apply this to today's society in terms of the content that's available on various platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, video games, etc. The amount of information and videos young people have access to plays a role in shaping their overall behaviors. If any of you are familiar with the various TikTok challenges that have been problematic, one that happened a few years ago related to vandalizing bathrooms, it was like a challenge on TikTok, and then it started taking off in schools across the country. So we have seen the impact of observing these behaviors in real life today. So discussing this further, while social learning theory does explain a great deal of behaviors, every theory has aspects that can be critiqued or criticized. Social learning theory is backed by empirical evidence. However, no theory is 100% perfect at explaining all possible reasons for problematic behaviors. Some of the primary criticisms of social learning theory include that it assumes passivity in the nature of the observer who receives rewards or punishments, that the theory does not explain why certain behaviors are rewarded or punished, and that it fails to explain why some individuals will not conform to social norms. So while it can be used to explain a wide variety of behaviors, it does not perfect at explaining why every single behavior takes place. So knowing what we have learned today about social learning theory, we'll now look at how it can be used in the field of social work. Social learning theory can be a useful lens to explain how we learn and why certain behaviors are taking place. Observing and modeling the behavior of people can help shape our behaviors. The feedback and reinforcement we receive from those behaviors influence how we continue to behave and respond in various situations. Social learning theory can help us explain behaviors from technology use, addictive behaviors, and even aggression. The most common application of social learning theory in social work is with cognitive behavioral therapy. This emphasizes the links between an individual's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, helping the client identify and unlearn thoughts and patterns of destructive behavior. Additional social learning theory interventions include things like gradual therapy techniques, positive modeling, symbolic coding, stress management, vicarious reinforcement, and systematic desensitization. In order for a theory to be a good fit in social work, it must be evidence-based. Since social learning theory comes from the behaviorist perspective, and there's a great deal of research surrounding the impacting of modeling and reinforcement, as well as how the thoughts can impact behavior, it is a well-researched perspective. This theory and therapies based on its key principles like cognition and learned behaviors are some of the most well-researched interventions. Social workers have an ethical responsibility to engage in evidence-based practice. The social work value of competence can be illustrated as social workers should be prepared to engage in critical review of social work's theoretical knowledge and best practice research before adopting a new approach to his or her practice activities. So it's important to note that before using a theory, make sure that there's some evidence to help back it up. It is important for us to incorporate a variety of theories into our practice as social workers, and I could see myself using this theory in my own practice. A contributing factor as to why I would use it is because social learning theory can help explain a wide variety of behaviors. I intend to work with a school-age population as an adjustment counselor. Much of the work done with students focuses on modeling positive behaviors and reinforcing them, to hopefully reduce the problematic behaviors they're exhibiting, whether this be things like aggression, peer conflict, or cell phone use. Social skills groups run by SACS include utilizing programs like Second Step. Second Step is a program that is utilized in the school that I work in, and it's designed to reduce impulsive, high risk, and aggressive behaviors and increase children's social competence, as well as other protective factors. The program builds on cognitive behavioral intervention models integrated with social learning theory, empathy research, and social information processing. Therefore, I can see myself using the principles of social learning theory to help better the lives of the students that I will be working with. Thank you for your time and attention to today's podcast. I hope you learned more about social learning theory works and even have thought of ways that you could potentially use this in your own practice.